Hey everybody, what is going on? Yes, your eyes do not deceive you. This is Marty back with Comic Talk, episode number 39. But this time I like to prefer to call this show Statue Talk. The reason being is because we have a very special guest for you guys tonight, creator of ARH Studios, Arahom. And before I introduce you guys to him, my panel member, my co-host tonight is no other than our favorite Gene Paul Ace Peter, Sean, say hi to everybody out there, man.
What's up? It's good. Yeah, man. It's good to have you back. It's awesome. I love it. I love Comic Talk back.
Dude, I'm so glad to be back, man. I've been on a year hiatus of, I guess, not doing really anything. And then finally, you know, I just had a wild hair up my ass. It says, I want to do a Comic Talk. I want to get back on here. I want to do a Comic Talk. Started doing videos again, started doing other things. And I was like, who do I want to come on as a special guest for Comic Talk? No other than the creator of ARH Studios himself, Mr. Arahom. Mr. Arahom, welcome to Comic Talk, episode 39. I could think of no other person to have as a special guest on my show tonight. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to come on my show, grace us with your presence, and just welcome again to Comic Talk.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show. I looked at some of your videos and I say, wow, it's great stuff, and I definitely would be proud to be part of it. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity just to be able to come on here. Absolutely, absolutely. And just a little bit about a history of Comic Fanatics and Comic Talk. Something we started about a couple years ago, and then so we would get people in the community together and just kind of talk about different things like comics and statues, movie reviews, TV shows, anything that falls in the realm of geekiness and nerdiness and things like that. But I will tell you, growing up, one of my very first passions and loves that I had was mythology and mythology and fantasy statues, coming from artists that used to grace us with the covers of heavy metal, creepy magazines, Savage Sword of Conan the Barbarian, Conan Saga, things like that. The older magazines that I was used to growing up in the early 60s and 70s with. And then seeing your studio, you do something different. You set yourself apart from a lot of the other statue creating type of companies that do a lot of superheroes. How did you get into the whole doing the mythology and doing things like within the fantasy realm?
That is definitely a long story, and it would bore your viewers with the whole thing. But I can give you a very short version of what my life was. I'm 45 years old right now, and I grew up in the 80s, you know, and there was one thing that I loved the most when I was a kid. It was called G.I. Joe, right?
Sure.
So G.I. Joes were my favorite toys when I was a kid. So I was a big fan of playing with G.I. Joes, and I was also a big fan of comic books. So there were those two things in my childhood that were a passion: comic books and G.I. Joes, right?
Sure.
So what happens then is that I started playing with my G.I. Joes and trying to transform them into superhero action figures. And I started modifying them, right? Painting and doing little changes with the costumes and adding helmets and making swords and things like that, you know, with epoxy clay, just as a hobby as a child, 13, 14 years old. And that's where it started. My involvement with sculpting started with modifying my G.I. Joe toys, right? I also loved comic books, as you just said. I was a big fan of superhero comic books as well. And then those two things came together. And when I was 15, I thought, okay, I want to be a sculptor. You know, I mean, it came from that early age in my life.
So is it safe to say a lot of the sculpting that you did, what is the inspiration for a lot of your statues? You do the sculpting for the prototype pieces?
Right now, I am the only sculptor at ARH Studios. I have worked with many other sculptors before. We actually when I incorporated the company back in 2008 here in the United States, I incorporated as ARH Studios as a corporation here. I did a few actually with the first 3 statues that I released as a company. I did the sculpting myself, and then I started hiring the guys at the time that were the big names in the industry, right? You know, I wanted to be able to get all those famous sculptors at the time that were working for other companies like Sideshow and Boeing Designs and DC Direct and things like that. They were the big names in the industry. And then I started hiring them to work for ARH Studios too, because I could associate their fame with my company and people would start noticing us. So after that, I realized that not all those guys that they were famous and stuff were, you know, I didn't had a great return in terms of satisfaction from the work. Some of them, not all of them, of course. Most of those guys were great artists and great professionals as well. But some of them, I didn't actually enjoy much the experience. Then I started selecting more the group of people that would work with me. So I kind of liked some and they just like others. And the ones that I liked the most, then I started working with them more, you know, with them. And I started working with basically 2 guys only that were after that first initial phase that I was opening to every single one that I could get my hands on. I started working with 2 guys. One of them was the first guy that did our first digital sculpture for ARH Studios. We switched from everything being done by hand with clay into the digital world, right? So the guy was called Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira is a great sculptor, digital sculptor that works today for big companies like Pop Culture Show and others. So he actually started his career working with ARH Studios, and then he now is a big name out there. Then after his phase, I started working with another great sculptor called Aaron Beinert. He's I think is my favorite guy out there in terms of being a professional in the sculptor. He's extremely talented, and in my opinion, the best guy out there that I have ever worked with. So Aaron, well, we started working as a freelance. He wrote me an email one day and he said, "Well, I'm being laid off from Todd McFarlane Toys." You know, he was a sculptor there.
Okay.
He wasn't famous, you know, he wasn't famous at all in terms of name in the media, but he was a great sculptor already, and he worked for McFarlane Toys. And McFarlane went through a down phase at that time, and he got laid off. And he said he wanted to do some work for me, like a freelance work. And then I started working with him. He did 1, he did 2 and 3, and suddenly I realized, okay, this is the best guy I ever worked with. And back in 2014, I hired him as the sole sculptor for ARH Studios. So then we had this phase with him for 2 years, basically, only, and he was the only sculptor of ARH Studios back in 2014-15. And so the statue that you have behind you there, the Arcala Seduction, that is the big one there, yeah, that was sculpted by Aaron. Aaron Beinert, and then so he brought the company up, you know, in terms of quality, in terms of the beauty of the statues and the quality of the sculpture, and it all, you know, it was elevated by his work a lot. And so after him, of course, he ended up getting a better deal to, you know, he was hired by a bigger company, of course, and I couldn't say, you know, anything other than good luck, you know. So he moved on to another company, and then I became the sole sculptor of ARH Studios again, you know. So right now I don't even have the guys that I like to work with anymore, because they are working for bigger companies than mine, and I don't want to work with the other guys that I wasn't happy with, you know, to begin with. So I said, okay, now the only thing is I have to be the sculptor for ARH Studios again. So from 2016 forward, basically everything that's been putting out, the company's been putting out, is being sculpted by me. Yeah. So the Aaron that you have behind you as well on the other side of your table there, that was my first digital sculpture. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful piece. And how did you get the inspiration for her anyways?
Well, Aries as well as Arcala, the two statues that you have there, they are two comic book characters, right? Back in 2014, I decided that I wanted to write some comic books to validate the characters that we were creating, because I I don't produce superheroes like like DC Comics and Marvel, that kind of stuff. I create my own characters, right? I create my own statues. I do my own versions of mythology and history and things like that. And so back in 2014, I created these two statues, one for Arya and one for Arcala. It's not even that one that you have. It's another statue that I did first. And as a statue, just as a product to sell as a statue. And then I like both the both statues very much. I said, okay, those have two cool designs. They're interesting outfits and things like that. So I started thinking, what story could be behind those statues, right? Or what, those characters. I mean, if they were actually a comic book character, who they would be. And man, that was like a bug bite, you know. Once I started writing stories or thinking about stories of comic books, I got fascinated with the idea of writing comic book stories. And then ARH Studios started. I created ARH Comics, which is a branch for ARH Studios, and we started producing comic books. And those were the two first characters that we produced, Arian and Arcala.
I have that very print that's right behind you too, of Arcala too. It came along with the statue, of course. It's a very, very gorgeous print, by the way. But the artwork onto this, it's definitely detailed. It's very beautiful, seductive, enchanting, all of that put together. But even besides the women, you come out with some amazing pieces of the men, and you show how some of the anatomy of their bodies being just so muscular, defined, and toned, and all of that right there, it's just amazing. Some of your work you've had.
I think that it's a little bit because of where I was where I was born. I guess I think it's in my blood. I was born in Brazil, and I'm a Brazilian guy, so Brazilian women have that kind of feature. We have beautiful, athletic, and like women with some volume, I would say.
voluptuous women.
I think in terms of a taste for women, I always had that kind of image of what a perfect image of a woman would be. Of course, we all try to have that perfect image for, but the image of the women, I always thought as a voluptuous kind of athletic kind of a body.
Sure.
And that shows in the work I do, of course. When I'm sculpting, the proportions that I give to the body is based on what I think would be the ideal image of a character, Now
go ahead. I was saying that was going to be one of my questions, was that when I'm looking at your pieces, the proportions and everything is it's just so nice. I was wondering, did you do have any live models? Pose for the concepts or the poses themselves?
No, we don't. We don't have live models. It's an interesting question because we tried that once. When Aaron and I were working together, he moved here to Idaho, where I live, and he came from New Jersey and moved, and he lived here for about 2 years with me. Not with me. I mean, he lived here in the city, so we worked in the studio together. So, and then one day he came to me and said, "Arahom, we need to hire a model to pose for us, a live model to come here and pose, because with a live model, I can have so much more references for my work other than just pictures that we see online and things like that." And then we had that experience of hiring a model to come and pose for us. It was very fun. It was very entertaining. The model was really nice, and it was a great person to get to know. And we were so embarrassed because we were just a bunch of guys in the studio, and the model came, and she was such a beautiful woman, such a beautiful model. And we were all embarrassed that we were, with her there. And of course, we needed her to be, in the bikini kind of thing, and shorts and things like that, so we could actually take pictures of her. And I remember that I built a kind of a platform, of a wood platform that could spin around. So we put the model on that platform, and she would hold the pose, and we would just spin the platform with her, and then take pictures, right? So following Aaron's request for that kind of thing, and we tried that, but it actually, to be honest with you, we never actually used those images for anything. We just wasted our time, the model's time, and things like that. It was a nice experience having the model posing, but we are so used to scope directly from our mind and from image references that when we realize that we don't actually need the live model to know how the body works, in terms of movement or anything. It's already hardwired in our brains, I guess, how the woman body or the man's body is. So it was a great experience, but it didn't help us at all in terms of having a live model.
Oh, talk about hardwire. You mentioned, earlier that, growing up, you were influenced by artists like Frank Frazetta.
Yes.
And so I just want to jump right in and ask you about the Death Dealer piece.
Okay.
What was the process about getting that? Because I mean, Frazetta just doesn't let anybody do his work,
Yeah.
So the process about getting the rights and being able to do it, not only was it a privilege, I imagine, but it must have been really exciting for you as a fan of Frazetta. So what was the process like that for you?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I always been a great fan of Frazetta since I was very young. One thing I was telling you guys offline. It was about my skills as a artist, right? As a drawing artist. Yes, when I was actually a child, before I started sculpting, I liked to draw comic books, right? I wanted to be a comic book artist. And then Frazetta was my great inspiration. I was like 13, 14, and I had a ton of magazines at the time. There was no internet at that time. I'm that old. So I had magazines with images and pictures of Frazetta, and I would cut off the ones and make my own book with images, reference images. And Frazetta was one of the most constant of the ones that I would choose as an inspiration. All the covers that he did for magazines and comic books, this stuff, and so he was a great inspiration. I was always a big fan. When I became a company and things started to grow, because I incorporated ARH Studios in 2008, but things started to pick up actually back in 2010, a couple of years later, once we started to get more notoriety around, people started noticing my work. And so things started to get a little more interesting there. And then we get and then in 2014, I was already with a situation that could allow me to start getting a few licenses, right? And I had my first licensed statue produced back in 2012, which was a Conan statue. That was the first ARH Studios license ever. And we produced a couple of Conan statues in 2012 and 13. And then once my license for Conan ended, I wanted to branch out and say, okay, what else can I get? What other license maybe I can bring to ARH Studios and start producing some of that licensed statues as well. And then I started branching around and seeing what could be available. And the very, very first one I went after, there was like my focus, like a laser focus. The one I really, really wanted to do was Frazetta. And then I contacted them through their website, and I got a good reception. They replied to me, and they saw the work that we had already produced for Conan and the other statues we had with the company. And they said, "Wow, you do great work. Let's talk about it." So man, at that day, I had a smile that would go from one year to another. I couldn't stop smiling. I was so happy that I was with the opportunity of representing Frazetta. It was like a dreaming coming true. Having the opportunity to produce statues of those paintings that I had grown up with. I had grown up with Frazetta as an inspiration. So now I'm going to be able to make statues of it. So it was a great phase for ARH Studios. Okay, and then what I did was I made that public. I told everyone that we had the license, and then we would start making statues. And what happened was that I was contacted by the sculptors. Instead of me going after the sculptors and say, hey, do you want to work for me and you want to do this for me and stuff like that, they came to me, a bunch of great names, great artists came to me looking for the opportunity to sculpt Frazetta because they were also big fans, you know. So we had big names in the industry at the time, and I probably still today. They came and they worked with, wanting to work with me, you know. Troy McDavid, one of the great sculptors that I love working with, and unfortunately, I stopped working with him because he only did hand sculpting. He never moved into digital, and I told him, man, move into digital. He never did it, so he kind of got left behind, I guess, you know, in the train. But Troy McDavid was one of the guys. The other guy that came to do work for us was Tony Cipriano. He did the Huntress statue for us, the one with the two tigers. He was a big name in the industry as well, and I was always a big fan of his work as well. So when he showed interest in working with us on the Frazetta line, I was kind of, you know, like, wow, it's going to be wonderful to have him on board as well. So Tony Cipriano did some work for us. He actually did he did the Huntress statue for us. And then, of course, my main choice and the guy that I love in this industry, which is Aaron Beinert. And he said, Aaron, you will do my two favorite sculptures. You know, for you, you're going to be in charge of the two best ones, the ones that I think are the ones that have the most appeal, you know, for everybody. I mean, in terms of as a product, definitely were the two ones that I thought would sell the most, which were the the Frazetta on the Deaf Dealer. Oh,
Deaf Dealer, right? Yeah.
Sometimes the word going.
Okay.
Yeah, the Deaf Dealer, and he did the Barbarian too. You know, the Frazetta Barbarian, the one with the girl and, you know,
yes, that is a beautiful, iconic, very very popular piece right there.
So
yeah.
I hired him. Well, actually, he was already working with me full time, but you know, I hired him to. Actually, no. Actually, he started working on those statues before he came to work with me, but then he finished the statues already here. So he did first the Deaf Dealer statue, and I told him, Aaron, and he is a digital sculptor. Okay, he actually is good in any medium that you give him. He can do digital, he can do wax, he can do clay. He's a genius. He can do anything. So I told him, look, I want those statues to be sculpted in wax. And then he said, no, are you really sure that you want to do this? Well, because the statue is this huge. The horse is enormous. And I said, that will be, you know, a lot of work. And I say, it doesn't matter. I want it to be done by hand because we can put into a hand sculpture more more of a feeling that resembles the Frazetta style, you know. So that was my idea at the time. And I believe today, I believe it was a mistake. We should have done everything digital. It would be a lot cheaper and a lot faster and maybe even a lot better. I don't know. But what we did was we did everything in wax. He did that huge sculpture of that horse completely in wax. And I was amazed with his talent, you know, the quality of the work. If you get that statue and you look at very close at the details of the texture and all the carving that he did for the saddle and all the things that he did for the costume, it's amazing how he could actually do that, you know. So the Deaf Dealer on the horse is a great project that we worked on, and I'm very proud of having produced that statue, and it's all thanks to Aaron. You know, he's the guy that did it, and the Frazetta loved it.
It's a gorgeous piece, and it's huge. You're right. It's absolutely a huge piece, and
heavy.
And heavy. I can imagine that as a centerpiece, you know, on my coffee table. Well, that's definitely what they call a conversation starter, if anything, when people come walk into your house. Arahom, walk me through the process from step one, if you would, because I love statues. I love collecting statues. I love everything about statues, but I don't know the process from step one, like on the slate where the artists come in, the idea, then where it goes next, and where it goes next to the final product. Would you mind doing that?
No, of course, no problem. It's pretty simple and it's straightforward. It's just like anything that you do for any other business, I guess. You have to start with an idea, right? You have to start with an idea of what you want to do. So the moment that you said, okay, I want to do this, and then you start thinking of the design of that, how that's going to look like, and what kind of you need a set of goals. You need to know the scale that you want to produce that, and what's the market, the target audience that you want to reach. Because in ARH Studios, for instance, we have customers that love to collect the girl statues, but they don't buy the male statue that we make. So when we make a girl statue, we know that we're not going to reach all our fans. We're going to reach a segment of that fan base, right? The same way when we do a historical statue and a mythology statue, they also reach different segments, right? So it's kind of like we have a three or a segment of fans like in three ways, right? The guys that like the girls, the guys that like the men, and
your target audience, basically.
My target audience, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course we have those who buy everything. I have customers that buy all the stuff that we release, and it's amazing because
of course, yeah, why not, right?
Exactly. They send me pictures, and the ones that I'm more proud of is the statue of the Conan that I did with the snake, which is the biggest statue that we ever produced. And when I see those pictures with those statues, the statues in their collection, I say, wow, that's a very proud moment.
Do you keep that for yourself too, Arahom? Like say you make the prototype, you keep the prototype or a piece?
No, I don't keep the prototype, because the prototype goes to the factory.
Okay.
But I keep the sample, which is the statue that they make to pair with mine, and say, okay, so I can compare what they did with what I did, and then approve or not approve. So they send me the sample, and then the sample I have a sample of all of them, of course, right? Now, but about the process, and I know, so we don't go off on a tangent here. The process is, so after you decide, okay, that statue, you know what you want to do, and you know what kind of segment you want, and what kind of customers you're trying to please with that, and then you create your design, right? Okay, so I want to create a design, if let's say a mythology character, like say a Medusa, right? Medusa is one of our best sale products that we ever produced. The statues, all the Medusa that we produced were very, very good sales. So what we try to do is create that design that will have the most appeal, right? And then and we use our imagination, our references, and we do a lot of research online. There's no doubt that the online provides us with a lot of information in terms of designs and things that we think that's cool, and oh, this is beautiful, this is not beautiful, oh, look at this kind of armor, look at this kind of weapon, and things like that. So there's a lot that we get inspiration from the internet. There's no doubt about it. And once we settle on the design of what we will do with that statue, then we start the process of sculpting it, right? That's the first thing we do. Right now, we only do digital sculpture, so there's no even need for me to talk about the hand sculpting or the clay sculpting, anything like that, because we do everything in the computer now. So we open our program that's called ZBrush. is a sculpting program. I think it's the only one that people use right now, at least as far as I know. And we use this program to start sculpting in digital. It is very similar to what we do with our hands in real life, but it also has some tricks and things that you need to learn. It has a learning curve from you to go from sculpting in clay to sculpting digital. There is that kind of process that you have to. But once you were there, once you learn to do, it's pretty much like sculpting with clay, right? Basically. And then we do the digital sculpture. Once the digital sculpture is done, there is one thing that we need to do is what we call processing it. Processing is preparing that digital sculpture for printing, because everything that you do digital has to be 3D printed, right? And then we have to finish the sculpting and then do the processing. The processing, for you to have an idea, takes almost, well, it depends from sculptor to sculptor, but for me, I think that the processing takes as much time as the sculpting itself. So if I take a week to sculpt something, I would take another week processing it, basically. It requires that you cut the statue in parts. So if you're going to print, let's say that you're going to make a statue of me, right? So here between the edge of my shirt and my arm, I will cut it here. So I will print the arm separate from the body. And then the arm will go inside the shirt, you know, a little bit of the edge here of the shirt will be overlapping on top of the arm. So I can fit the arm back inside the shirt, right? So this process is very complicated and it takes a long time, and you got to do it right, because if you messed up with that, once you get the prints, they won't fit, you know, and things like that, and it would be a pain. So you got to spend a lot of time preparing the product, the statue, for 2D printing. So that's the processing that goes into that, basically. And also you put the pegs, you know, the pegs, let me show you.
Right, the arms or whatever, the headpiece or anything like that.
Let me show you this really quick. I don't know if the camera can show. These are two pieces that I have just 3D printed right now, okay? The head and the torso, right? The top of the torso. They just came out of my 3D printer yesterday, right? So the head fits on the body like this, right? Like this. So the head fits on the body. I don't know if you can actually see. Oh, right, that's good, right? So the head fits on the body. Now you see that there is a hole there and the peg here, right? You see the hole in the peg on the head. So you have to actually make those cuts and those pegs before you can actually print the piece. You see? So once you get those two parts separate from the 3D printer, you just go and fit them and they fit together like that. You see? So that's basically what the processing is. You scope the whole thing as one piece, and then you cut it in several small pieces. You see the torso has no arms, has no belly, has no head, just the torso itself, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the kind of thing that we normally do. And then so okay, in this case, for it, she is a hunter, so she has a bow, right? She has a bow with arrows that go here in the back. So in the back, you have a hole there that fits the peg on the quiver, right? You see the peg on the quiver. So that peg fits on the hole like that. So this is called processing, and this is what we normally do after I finish sculpting. I do it all digital, and once the processing is done, we then move it to the 3D printer. And the 3D printer, it could be if you know, I have my own 3D printers. I have all the 3D printing work that we do. We have the machines here at the studio, and what I do is I get those files, I upload them to the 3D printers, and then the 3D printers print everything, you know, like what you just saw. And so once you get the print like this, once you get these things, now the next step would be to create a prototype, right? You have to finish these, like they have to be sanded a little bit and cleaned and made, you know, ready for painting. And then you have to assemble everything, right? You have to assemble, and it's things like that. And then you go and you make molds. You have to make silicone molds, right? You get those pieces here, and you prepare them, and you clean them and finish them and make everything to fit snugly and beautiful. And once you have all that, and then you make a separate silicone mold for each part. So you make a silicone mold for this, make a silicone mold for this, and then once you have the silicone molds, you cast with resin. You inject resin inside the silicone molds, and you then get a copy of it. Then now instead of having one, I have two pieces, right? Because I made a mold and have. So once I have the copies, I get those copies, and then I assemble, I glue everything together, and then I paint, right? And then I paint one. It's called the prototype. So the prototype is what we send to the factory. The factory will receive the prototype, and they will use normally we send to the factory a prototype for the molds, so they can make molds as well. So we send the piece, the statue in pieces just like that, so they can make their molds as well. And then we send them a separate or a second statue, which is the painting sample, the painting prototype, which they will use to reproduce the same type of paint job that I did here, they will do there. And when they get there, and then it's another process and things like that. But basically, in terms of prototyping, it goes from digital sculpting to 3D printing to mold making and casting, and then we have the painted sample done at the end.
Now I hear something in the maker box back there now. The printer going now. What are you working on there right now?
That's the MakerBot here that I have, but that's not the one that I'm using right now. This machine here is not being used. The ones that are being used are here on the other side. Let me see if I can move the camera a little bit. You see there?
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Yeah, those are actually the the Formlabs 2. There's a great machine as well, and that's the machine that you're hearing right now. I'm printing the last piece of this statue here right now. I'm printing it right here, and once the last part of that is printed, I can go and I go to the studio, and then I will start preparing the prototyping there.
What's your latest piece right now? Is that your latest piece that you're working on?
Well, this is the next one, right? This is the next one that we're going to be producing for now 2019. We're releasing now in 2019 four new statues that I have been showing, posting videos on Facebook to show about the new statue that we're producing. And this is one of them. This is one of the statues that we're going to be producing now in 2019 of the new four. But
and you also have, and I talked to you a while ago, and you were telling me that also you have plans for possibly showing those off at an exhibit here next year in 2019.
You mean the Comic-Con?
Yeah, for the Comic-Con.
Yes. I have plans for coming back to New York Comic-Con in 2019. We have been to New York 3 times. We have been there in 2013, 14, and 15. Those were the 3 years where ARH Studios really grew in terms of exposure, and we started to our fan base started to solidify a little, and so those 3 years were very good years for ARH Studios. And then what happened is that in 2014 I started producing the comic books. Right, I branched out from statues to comic books.
Can I show those real quick?
Exactly.
Just in case anybody was curious about ARH Studio Comics, as you see right there, their emblem, ARH Studios. They have comic books also, and here's one of Arcala right here. And
that's the Arcala and Arian.
Yep. So there you go. And I don't have all of them, but as you can see, I have a good chunk of them. So and beautiful artwork on those, by the way. Really, really love the artwork on here.
Exactly. So when we started planning those comic books was back in 2014. So what happened was, and this is the kind of decision that a company does, and whoever is in charge of the company is the responsible for making that decision, and also is responsible if that decision fails. Right. So I was the one in charge of that decision in 2014. And at ARH Studios, and I decided to get some of the money that we had and invest into creating ARH Comics to produce comic books. But it was a significant amount of investment that we had to do to create a new company from the ground zero. Right, I had to allocate a lot of the company money from the statue branch into the comic book branch, and I had to take the chances of that failing or not failing. And so unfortunately it didn't come out the way I expected. I had no knowledge of the comic book industry at all. I was like a virgin, in terms of dealing with comic book production, and I had no idea of anything. I just had the passion inside me. I wanted to do it, and I was motivated to do it. I wanted to do the best work I could do, and you can attest that by the quality of the comic books that you have in your hands. We had the best artists, the best writers, the best kind of work that we could gather to produce those comic books, and the best quality we could put into producing them, I did. So they cost a ton of money, right? That every one of those issues costs a lot more to produce than a single statue. In terms of financial investment, to produce a statue like this, like the cost involved in producing a statue like that, if I gather all the costs with 3D printing, sculpting, and prototyping, etc., is a lot less than producing a single comic book prototype, right? So let me grab something really quick here. I'll show you.
Sure, that's crazy to realize that producing a statue is much cheaper than trying to produce a comic. You know.
Okay, so here's I have three comic books here, right? We produced an Aryan comic book, like a graphic novel in 5 parts. And then we produced Arcala, right, the Queen of Empires, in 7 parts. Is another graphic novel in 7 issues. And then we produced Astria, which was the 3rd character that we produced as a comic book, in another graphic novel in 5 issues, right? So each one of those issues, like this one is 7, right? 7 chapters. So each one of those 7s costs more than to produce a full statue prototyping.
Wow.
It's so I had to multiply to be able to release one story in 7 chapters. I have the cost of more than 7 statues. It's a lot of money.
Why is that? Why is that though?
It's because here, look at here the front page. Look at the name of all the artists that you have to hire to produce a comic book. You need to have a guy that writes the script. You need to have a guy that illustrates the script. You need to have another guy. Actually, I have 2 guys to color the pages. So 2 guys to color one page, and then you have another guy to do the lettering, like, you know, all the writing and the balloons and the dialogues that you see. You have to hire someone to do that, and then you have to hire someone to do the cover. So I have just to produce one comic book besides myself, because I'm the writer of the story, right? So I wrote the story, which I'm not getting paid for that. But if I wouldn't get paid, I would probably have to hire someone as well. But so I have me, and then I have the writer that writes the scenes. I have the illustrator. I have 2 colorists. I have the letterer, and then the cover. So 7 people to do one comic book, right? So if you have to pay all these guys, it costs a lot of money, right? So, and I didn't want to work with anybody. I didn't want to just hire, okay, whatever, you know, I can get cheaper. No, I wanted to get the best guys that I could, you know, and I assembled the best crew possible. And you see by the quality of the comic book, it's great quality. So that costs a lot of money. And I completely miscalculated the return. I thought, okay, no, we produce a comic book, and then we sell enough at least to break even, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So I don't need to have any profits. What I want is to promote the brand and promote the characters and things like that. I'm not into the comics for money. I am just trying to do something cool. And if I break even, I'm fine. But I didn't even get closer to break even, honestly, you know? So I had to finance everything out of my pocket, basically. The only thing that actually was covered by the sales of the comic book was the printing. So I print the comic books, you know, I printed all the prints I did. That it got paid because with the sales, right? We sold the comic books, and the money that I got from the sales covered the prints, but it didn't cover the prototyping. None of that. So basically, I had to finance everything out of my pocket, which was a big mistake, you know, a big mistake in terms of financial. As a CEO, I would fire myself.
Right.
It's you know.
Right.
So, and that's exactly what happened in 2014, right? We produced those comic books, and although it's a passion that I can't live without it anymore, I'm going to keep producing them, and actually the comic books brought a lot of positive things for the company, definitely. But that created a problem for me in 2015, because in 2015 I had, you know, used all that investment into the comic books. The money didn't come back, and then 2016 and 2017 were a struggle for me. Very difficult year in terms of finances, because I didn't have money to produce statues anymore. I had used the money to produce comic books, didn't have money to produce statues, and those 2 years were very hard, right? So and that's not the only thing. There were a few other mistakes as well. I'm not just saying that the comic books kind of brought the company down. That was not it. there were other mistakes that I did as a leader of the company that also helped and contributed for our bad years that we had in the last 2 years. But the comic books was one of the main factors that affected the company. So because of that, we did not go back to Comic Con in 2016 or 17. Basically, it costs a fortune to go to a Comic Con. I don't know if you guys have any idea how much it costs, but it costs a pretty penny. Not only for you to rent the booth and etc. Related to the space that you rent there, but also it has the trip, right? You have to go there, you have to get there. And I live in Idaho, and I have to go all the way to New York, so it's across country.
Because you're basically not making anything going to the Comic-Con. It's not like you're selling anything there, because you're basically promoting, you're setting up your booth, you're setting up, and you're maybe taking pre-orders for everything. So you're not really actually making money. So you're going everything with what's in your pocket to go there.
Exactly. Comic-Con is an investment. It's just like a big marketing campaign, right? You go there and you show your stuff, and people look and see how beautiful your work is, and then they get excited, and then they place orders. So it's a big advertisement, basically. And as any advertisement, you have to put a lot of money up front. And I didn't have that money back in the last two years. In 2016 and 17, I didn't have the money. So I did not go to Comic-Con. But this phase is now, I would say, almost over for ARH Studios. We are overcoming all those difficulties, and now the new line that is coming out now is being a huge success again. And then with the money from the sales of the new statue that we released in 2018, we're going to be able to have a very, very good year in 2019. And because of that, I'm planning on going back to the Comic-Con in 2019.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to talk about, like you talk about some of the mistakes made in the past, but moving forward, most recently we see this piece here, Cleopatra. This definitely pops out a whole lot more. Were you the head artist on this one?
Yeah, I sculpted the statue in this one. The only thing I didn't do there is the face, because the face was sculpted by Aaron. Aaron, as I said, is my favorite sculptor in the world, and he did the face for me. Everything else I did myself.
It's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, definitely. And this statue, as the one that we're releasing right now, among a few others, it's a great success. It's almost sold out already. We produce very few of those, but they are almost gone completely. And this is a huge piece. This is a 1/3 scale statue, and I have it behind me. You can see there in the back of my room that statue, how big that statue is. It's huge. Actually, I think it's the biggest 1/3 scale statue we produce, because of the lion that she's sitting on. Not the lion, it's a sphinx, right? It's a sphinx. So the sphinx and the base and etc. And she's a pretty big statue. It's a huge statue.
And that's the one thing I noticed about a lot of your pieces, is that you guys tend to go really big with them. Like, what is probably the biggest piece? Would it be the Death Dealer? Or I saw a Medusa that was just foiled at the bottom, and it was quite big.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know why that, you're not the first one to say that, of course, and I have heard that before, that we have the tendency to make big pieces with big bases and stuff like that. And I gotta be honest with you, I try my best to keep those statues small, because we had such a problem shipping them. Shipping these statues is a nightmare, right? Because some of those statues come in boxes that are bigger than what the post office will take. If you come to the post office with a statue that is larger, and the box that is larger than their measurements they won't ship it. And if they can't ship it, we can only use FedEx or UPS. And then FedEx or UPS, the cost of shipping is more expensive than the statue itself. So that brings me a lot of problems, shipping those statues. But at the same time that, I know it's problematic, and I know that it's costly to do that. I don't know. I think it's just like something that it's ARH Studios' style, I guess. We always end up making those big bases.
Well, I was looking at the smaller ones too, the 1/6 figures that you do with the I don't know if it's synthetic or is it real here, or
Well, those are actually action figures.
Right. So did you ever think about incorporating the hair that you do on the action figures into the statue, or mixing up the multimedia medium a bit?
Well, that's a good question. You know, Sideshow does that, right? They mix media. They mix a statue with clothing. I honestly never liked it. Never liked it. I never liked a statue dressed up with clothing, with fabric, right? Um, it's a preference. It's a personal preference. I don't think there's nothing wrong with the statue. It's beautiful. There are many sideshow pieces that I think that are worth having, that I would like to have as a collector. But I personally dislike fabric mixed with resin. I don't think they match. Now, the dolls, which are the ones that you mentioned in the 616 scale, those are not statues. Those are action figure dolls, right? Barbie, like Barbie dolls,
Right.
basically, right? I know people don't like me to call them dolls. I heard that you shouldn't call them dolls because people don't like the comparison with Barbies. But let's be honest, that's what they are. They look like Barbies, and I'm gonna call them dolls, right? But they are actually called action figures, right? So those those are different. Those are toys that you can actually pose and play with or whatever you know want to do it. So there's two separate things. And so for dolls and action figures, the fabric outfits and hair, that natural looking hair, I think it looks cool. I agree. I think it's beautiful. And we have one of the most beautiful action figure dolls that we're producing now, through ARH Studios, in associated with another company. Of course, we're not the ones producing it. We're just licensing them, right? We're licensing the designs of our products, but we're not the ones actually producing them, right? It's a third party company. We are like associated with another company to produce those dolls, right? So in that case, I think it's cool to have the fabric and the hair, the natural hair. But on statues, I'm not going to say you're never going to see it from ARH Studios, but I would say you're never going to see it from ARH Studios.
Right.
Because I think statues are statues. I imagine statues, as something that you could translate into a bronze casting. If there is something that I admire, is the sculpture more than the painting, right? I am primarily a sculptor, and the beauty of the statue for me is first in the sculpture and second in the painting. I enjoy the painting. I do the painting as well, and I like the painting. But the image of the statue without any painting, for me, is what it's most appealing. And so when I imagine those statues, I imagine them in one monochromatic design color, as a bronze or marble or things like that. And if they look beautiful in one color, that's how I want them to be. So, but if you infuse fabric into that, you'll never be able to have a bronze statue with a fabric clothing. So that's why I don't like it.
Arahom, do you mind showing the viewers the prototype headpiece of the Cleopatra that you guys are working on right now?
Sure, no problem.
It's an absolutely beautiful piece.
Yes. Just give me a second here. I was kind of comfort here.
and that's what the show is about. We try to get comfortable here. We just trying to kind of relax and get a little bit of chilling. As you notice, I have a little drinky drink every once in a while. Jean Paul H. Peter will testify to that. I kind of get a little bit tipsy on the show every once in a while.
Well, okay, guys. So here's I don't know if the lightning is enough here to show you. Let me see. Wait. Maybe a little more light. Okay, so this is the head, the second head of the Cleopatra statue that I did as the EX version. So for everyone that purchased that statue of the Cleopatra through ARH Studios website, every single one of you will get this statue for free. I mean, this head for free. Okay, I am producing the statue, the head now, with the second batch that we are going to do now in 2018. We'll be ready in 2019, of course, but all of you guys will get this head for free. Okay, and this is the head. Unfortunately, what happened is, and I'm going to be very honest with you, when I was producing the prototyping for the Cleopatra statue, okay, I had such a tight budget to make that statue. I was so out of money that I didn't have enough money to print that head. Okay, I had enough money to buy that resin, and I was so desperate to get that statue to the factory so they could start the production, right? So I said, okay, I gotta get the statue to the factory as fast as possible. And I used the last drop of resin to produce the statue with that huge base. You know, you see, guys, the huge base, the Sphinx. It took all the resin that I had, and then I didn't have enough to produce the head. And I said, okay, no problem. As soon as some money comes in, and I can buy more resin, and I have a little bit of extra money, I will then produce the second head. So I did it. I already showed pictures online, including on our Facebook page and etc. And this will be produced now, and then the customers that purchase the statue from us will be able to have that as well.
That's a gorgeous head, and I know we had talked about. I know Jeff Johnson had asked about early on. You were talking about 3D printing and everything, and then you also mentioned about the Frazetta wax sculpture and everything. What do you prefer as an artist? Not say, you know, just profitable wise, and not to say producing statue cost values and everything. Do you prefer say wax created statues over maybe 3D printed, or do you find them very similar, or do you think you can get more out of a 3D printer than you can do out of a wax? Does that take away from anything?
Okay, so about that, there's a lot of people that that say they prefer the hand sculpture, you know, because they look more natural or whatever reason. I don't think that. I don't think that. I think that the sculpting, the industry as a business has evolved like everything else in the world evolves. The industry of producing statues and those toys and toys as well has evolved, right? In the beginning, for dinosaurs like me that started back in, 20 years ago, I started sculpting when I was 19, professionally now. So it's 25 years ago when I actually started this profession. So when I first started 25 years ago, the only clay I had available was epoxy clay, right? So all the statues that I would do I was still living in Brazil at the time when I was 19 years old, and I started working there. And then the only clay I had available for that kind of work was epoxy clay. I still use it until today. Today, epoxy clay for me is the best clay for any type of work you do, with sculpting. And I still use it. But at that time, 25 years ago, that was the only medium you had to sculpt, clay, right? Other sculptors in the United States, they were used to have super scoopy, what they call super scoopy. Super scoopy is another type of clay. It's different from epoxy clay. It only hardens when you put it in the oven, right? You have to bake it so it actually gets solid, right? If you don't bake it, you can squish it and deform it. So you have to bake it so it to get hard. So there, in the beginning of time, when we were in the beginning of this industry, 25 plus years ago, I know Randy Bowen, which was one of the pioneers in this industry. He started much before me, so he's even older in the industry than I am. So 25 plus years ago, super scoopy for you guys Americans here, and epoxy clay for me there back down in Brazil was the only clay available. So we had to do whatever we wanted to do with that kind of clay. And then a few years later, there was a kind of a revolution in the industry. Some artists started to get into the business, and these artists coming from other areas in the industry, toys, and especially, is introduced the wax into the business. So and then we sculptors had to migrate from sculpting in clay into wax, right? Wax would allow you to have a much more detailed product. You could do in wax which you could never dream doing with clay, right? So wax was a revolution. And I remember, because I was part of the industry at that time, I remember when people stopped using clay and started migrating into wax, and we sculptors had to learn a completely new set of skills to work with wax. Wax is completely different from clay. It's totally different. So you have to learn everything again, basically from scratch, right? The only thing you keep is your ability to see three-dimensionally, but the sculpting itself is different. It's more carving than modeling, right? So you have to adapt yourself from clay to wax. A lot of sculptors never did the jump, the leap. There were a lot of sculptors that were left behind in the clay area, never jumped into wax. Those who did in the industry became relevant, and kept doing work. They kept producing work in wax because the industry required wax. Okay, so some of those sculptors never migrated. A lot of them disappeared, right? A lot of them they were left behind in the industry because the industry now had a new standard, which was wax. I think that the only guy that never jumped into wax that stayed relevant and with a huge following and with amazing work, I think, was Claiborne Moore. Claiborne Moore, he's a genius as well. You know, I met him at Comic-Con once. I'm a big fan of him. I had 3 statues. I actually have 1 statue of him yet in my collection, and I had a few others more that I lost, but I was a big fan of him. I think he was one of the only guys, if not the only, that never moved from clay, totally from clay into wax. I guess he always did his work in super scooping. So, but then we moved from clay to wax, right? And I had to move along with the market, right? I had to stay relevant, and I had to learn those new skills. And I actually spent a long time learning and refining my skills as a sculptor into wax. But the funny is that the moment that I actually started dominating wax enough to be producing, sculptures in wax, the industry changed again. So a new group of sculptors coming from other industries, most of them, I think, from video game stuff and things like that, they came into the statue industry with the digital. They starting sculpting into digital, and that changed the game again. So you now had wax was not good enough anymore because digital would give you what wax could never give. The same way that wax was a revolution in terms of for the clay, like left the clay guys behind, the digital left the wax guys behind. So you had to move again from wax into digital, or you would become irrelevant in the industry. And again, a lot of guys didn't make the leap. Other guys didn't want to learn another skill, and they were left behind, and they just fade out of the industry. But those who did the leap, did the change, and learned another set of skills, they kept going into the industry. So I had to do the leap as well, again, to digital.
Now, I just want to change gears a little here because art pieces and stuff like that, fantasy is such a interesting subject matter for statues and busts. I was wondering, would you, being Brazilian, how come you haven't tapped into maybe some of the Brazilian mythology, or, that would be interesting, no?
There's no mythology in Brazil.
No?
No.
Or South American, Quetzalcoatl and things like that.
No. We have American culture in Brazil is so diffused and is so spread out that it's almost like part of our own culture. I grew up just like what you guys, like you guys with Conan and Captain America and Batman and Spider-Man, and that was it. There is no Brazilian mythology to talk about. There is no Brazilian heroes. There's nothing in Brazil that is part of our culture in terms of, wow, this is a part of. There is none. There's none. We grew up just like you guys with American culture. I think like most of the countries in the world. I guess.
Pele is a pretty big hero. That would work as a statue.
Oh, Pele?
Yeah.
Pele, he's a football. He's a soccer player, right?
Yeah.
Arahom, where do you? I don't know. What do you think? You branched out to comic books. You're also branched out to 1/6 scales figures, or as you like to call them, Barbie dolls. And So, do you see yourself maybe? Are you still releasing? Are you planning on still releasing comic books in the future, or are you planning on branching out ARH Studios a little bit more besides mythology, besides fantasy? Is there anything that we can expect from that?
Yes, definitely yes. Comic books started the expansion in terms of business, as I see for ARH Studios, started, of course, with my second step, which was comic books. I had a plan. I had set a plan for ARH Studios in terms of growth. And the first step was to solidify my market with the statues industry and say, okay, I have my share, which is a small share, of course, but it is a share, and then I can rely on to finance the expansion I have planned for ARH Studios. So it took me a few years from 2008 and 9 when I started the company until 2015 to establish me in the market and have my share. So right, I have a tiny little share of the market, but that I can rely on. So now I produce statues, and I know those statues will sell and create and generate enough capital for me to keep spending, right? So once I solidified that market, which I already have, I wanted to go into comic books. And after comic books, I wanted to go into toys. It was my third step. My third step was branching out into action figures. And it happened before I actually could, because I had my plans was to myself finance branching out into comic book and into action figures. I said, okay, I'm going to find a way to produce my own comic action figures. When this company called Executive Replicas and TB League, when they came along and they said, oh, we like your stuff, we want a partnership with you to produce those toys, I saw in them a step farther in my own goal into branching out into that. So, okay, that is definitely now happening. The toy expansion that I wanted to do happened already, even before I had planned it. Now, think that I could not take the third step before I took the second step, because the second step was creating the characters, right? So the comic books, with the comic books, I created my IPs, ARH Studios IPs, Arcala, Arian, and all the characters that we are creating. Those are our characters, or our intellectual property. Now that we have those intellectual property, now we can branch them out into the other steps, which is the toys, right? So along with toys, I have also plans for doing some board games. I always like games, board games and stuff like that. And I have been already for the past year with trying to develop some idea of creating a board game with the ARH Studios characters, right? So this is something that is still just in the ideas realm. We started to think about, me and a friend, on how to go into the board game and have an idea to create a board game that is related to ARH comics characters. But my next step, which is the one that I want, it would be my fourth step in the ladder that I want to grow with ARH Studios, would be the video games. I think that the day that I can license Arcala or Area into a company that can produce video games for ARH Studios, then I will have reached one of the biggest goals that I have set to myself. I want to have those characters one day turn into a video game product. I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't understand anything about video games, and there is it's a huge leap forward. But one day, I will have enough exposure of the characters and created a solid base enough to have someone interested in coming to me and say, hey, your interesting character that you have, you created a solid universe that we can maybe transform into a video game character or something like that. That is definitely a goal.
You know what I'd like to see is Area, not just as a movie, but I would like to see Area as an HBO series or a Netflix series, because because the movie you only get that hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of that character, right? But with a Netflix series or an HBO series or something like that, you get episodes after episodes after episodes to be able to kind of develop that character into that storyline, correct?
Yes, well, that is actually the last goal of my life. It is the movie and industry. I have written already quite a few screenplays for movies. I have written stories for the books. We actually have already published 2 books for our cow. Let me grab them just a second. Hold up.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you mentioned one thing, and you just kind of you bring out the inspiration and the passion in other people, don't you? Don't you, Sean? Don't you do that?
Right.
Okay, guys. So here's the thing. I have those 2 books that we produced. Okay, those are full novels, right? So like there are no pictures, just words. Those just like normal books. And we produced 2 books already. This is book number 1. This is book number 2. And these are Arcala's story, as you can see in the title. There, Arcala, right, is the character that is right behind you in the statue. We released 2 books already, and we have a series of books that we are producing. The 3rd one is being written. I actually already have the story written for the 3rd story, because this is a trilogy, right? Trilogy to tell Arcala's story. And I have this great guy working with me. His name is Abraham Kawa, right? He's a Greek writer.
Abraham Van Helsing. That's very interesting.
Well, no, his name is Abraham Kawa.
No.
Yeah.
It's amazing, Arahom, that you get in, not just creator of ARH Studios and the characters you see there, and the statues and the comic books and the toys. Or Barbie dolls, as you like to call them. Now, you know, we're just learning you have these actual books, these screenplays, trilogies, storylines that you've created, and that's just amazing. It's amazing. It's more than what I realize a CEO of a company is doing, because in any other mind, like you look at your ARH studios on Facebook and anything, all you see is statues. That's it. All you see the statues. Maybe you'll see, but then we're learning a little bit more about what your company is about and the products and what you're looking at, and it's amazing. It's amazing about the things that you're doing with the company.
Yeah, the vision is so much bigger than what I thought before. You know, from when we sat down an hour ago to now, I'm starting to see the broader picture of what's going on over there.
Yeah, you see, it's a step process. You know, I realize that it's a step process. My final goal, if one day, I'm gonna tell you here, I never told this anybody, okay, except my own mother. I think she's the only one I know. One day, if I see a movie of one of my characters in the theaters, I can die happy. You know, I say, okay, I reach my goal. My God, if I live a lifetime and one day a movie is made of Arcala, I will die the happiest man on the earth. Okay, so this is my final goal. This is where I want to work towards. This is what I want to get, and I'm planting the seeds. I believe in planting seeds, right? If you want to get anywhere in your life, you're gonna plant seeds first, and then you have to take care of those seeds for them to germinate, and then one day grow into a tree. So what I've been doing is planting those seeds. I have been creating those characters, which they are awesome characters. If you read the stories, you understand what I'm saying. There's a great characters, and I have a great foundation to expand. And my 5 steps go as a company is statues first, and then from the statues get enough solid market there to finance the branching out, and then go into the comic books, create the characters, establish the IPs. Once you have the IPs established and people get to know them, I will invest. I have been investing money of my own money into promoting these characters. You know, and the more money I have available, the more money I will invest into promoting the characters, promoting the IPs, and then branching out into toys. The action figures is the first step. I want to do the game boards as well. One day I will get there. You can be sure of that. Because that's something I can do myself. I and a friend of mine, we are already creating the game. We already have a concept. We have an idea, and one day we will have that game created. It's just a matter of money, actually, basically. So, and once we establish the board game, I want to go into video games. Video games is a higher step because it requires something that it's either money or someone that comes to me and say, hey, we want to partner up with you. So I need to have a solid enough brand. ARH Studio has to be solid enough of a brand, and the IPs must be recognized and liked enough for someone to have interest in producing a video game from us. Just like what Executive Replicas did with the dolls. They liked our designs, they liked our characters, and they say, oh, we want to do it in partnership with you. So I need to call attention of someone into the video game industry to come and say, hey, we want to use your IPs. But that's, or I will have to finance it myself, hire someone and pay someone to do it. And this costs a lot of money. So it's a future step. So by the time that we get there, I believe by the time we'll get there, I will have created enough of a strong base with these characters to get the interest of a movie producer or a TV series producer or something like that. Because the material is good. That I am sure. The material is good. There's enough stuff in these books to overwhelm a Hollywood producer. I was talking the other day with the writer and with other people as well, that I have enough material in here in these stories to have a 10-year long comic book series. If I release a monthly title, I have enough stories for 10 years just for Arcala. So it is something solid. It's something that can be expanded, and whoever comes and looks at the material will say, well, this is good stuff. We would like to invest.
Arahom, as far as the book goes, you have a writer that does it. How involved are you with the storylines for those books?
Well, this is a partnership between me and Abraham, basically, right? In a sense that in terms of ideas, right? I am, of course, the producer of them, and but what happens is I create the story. I have this idea for a story, and then I write it down, and then I send the idea to him and say, hey, take a look at this and give me what you think of it. Tell me what you think of it. And most of the time he crucifies me. He says it's bad. You had to change this and this and that. And then of course I absorb all the information that he gives me in terms of feedback, and then I go and change and I tailor that idea into something that it's more professional, right? Because I am not a professional writer. I don't know what kind of professional I am, but I am not a professional writer, that's for sure. So I give him the idea that I have as a synopsis, right? I write a synopsis of a story, and then he hammers it down and said, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And then I go and change. And then I send it back to him. And then he said, well, now it's better in this. And then he gives me suggestions on how to improve even more what I already created. And then using his suggestions and my rewriting and the things that we conclude that it's good. And then we write a final synopsis, right? A final outline. And then I give it to him. And then he goes and expands on that, creating what's in the book. So in the book, the words that you read are his words based on my ideas and my stories. So it is a partnership kind of creation process, right? I create the story, but I wouldn't say that I create everything. There's a lot of his input in here as well. There's a lot of his creativity. There's a lot of his talent that is in the book. And I'm gonna tell you this, the same admiration I have for Aaron Beinert as the best sculptor that I have ever worked with, and one of the best in the industry, I have for this guy as well. Abraham, I have a tremendous respect for his work. I have a tremendous admiration for him, and I am one of his biggest fans. I love reading his work.
Now, say he writes something down that you don't necessarily see that as a as part of your, I guess, your inspiration or part of where that character, you want that character to go. Is he pretty good as far as saying, you know, you're right, we can twerk that to kind of fit your viewpoint, kind of fit your inspiration, your ideas of that character?
Yes, definitely. Yes, he's very professional. One of the things that I like to what I like about working with people is the first thing I do is I measure their professionalism. If they are professionals in their craft, and then I have respect for them, just like Aaron. Aaron is a great professional as a sculptor, and I have a tremendous respect for him. So when he suggests something based on his professional opinion, I have the tendency to listen to, right? I look at what he's suggesting and I listen. The same goes with Abraham. He is a professional, and when he suggests something and I take in consideration and I give it a huge value and a huge weight for his opinion. Ultimately, of course, the decision is mine to accept or not accept his ideas, right? But as the time grew between him and I, we have been working together since 2014. So it's about 4 years that we have been working together. So as the time grew, I respect him more, and his opinions are more and more effective, right? I listen to him more than I used to listen before. One interesting thing just about this thing is that right in the beginning, when we started working together, and he started writing the scripts for the first comic books, I told him like, oh, I want this character to do this thing. And then he said, no, man, you can't do that. You can't use this character to do this. And he said, definitely no, Arahom. I don't agree with that at all. And then I said, okay, Abram, I hear you. I appreciate your input, but I want it to be done like I said. It has to be done like I said. And then he said, well, sorry, but if this is the case, I can't do it. Man, this was right in the beginning. You know, like, you know, when your new girlfriend that you're new, you know, you guys are completely, you know, there yet. That's basically what happened between him and I. You know, we were not on the same page yet. And I say, man, if that's the case, then we won't be able to work anymore. You know, because I have a vision. And this vision is what I want to, you know, there. And if you're not on board, and if you can't, then we can work anymore. And then, of course, he changed his mind and said, okay, let's do your way. And then we end up, having that thing happening in the story. And I believe he agrees with me now. That was a good decision, because it was actually a good decision, because the character was a one-dimensional character, and I wanted to give it a more of a background and have it a more, diversified idea for what the character should be. And I think everything ended up happening the way we were both happy, But this doesn't happen anymore now. Now it's different. Now we have a much more friendly relationship, and he knows how to approach me in a different way. And most of the time, I listen to him than the other way. When he has something to add to the story, I listen to him more than before, of course.
Right. Now, we have a question from somebody watching, liking the covers, asked, in your 25 years, which statue or collection of statues are you the most proud of? Have you made your dream statue yet?
Well, I could give you that basic answer that everybody does, that everybody gives. It's the last statue that I did is the one I'm most proud of. This is BS. I have done statues that I'm proud of, and I have done statues that I'm not proud of. I have done statues that I love, and it's not necessarily because this is the last one that I did that I'm the most excited about it. I think it's BS, but I could say that. It's always the last one that I'm working, that I'm more excited, and it's not. There are a couple of characters that I love working on, and there are others that I work because I have to, basically, right? Because I cannot just sculpt Arcala statues. Basically, if I could sculpt Arcala statues one after the other, I basically would be doing just Arcala and Aryan statues, because those are the ones I really love to sculpt.
Well, I'd like to point out the Poseidon, the Zeus, and the Hades one. I guess that would be the historical trinity. They beautiful pieces.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, will there be any more extension of that? Will there be any?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yes. I have not all the statues that you see at ARH Studios were sculpted by me, of course. I have worked in every one of them. Basically, I have painted them, made molds for them, made contributions in the sculpting for them. But some of those statues were sculpted by other guys, right? But the ones that I did, that I am the most proud of, definitely the one that comes to my mind as in first place is the Conan statue that I sculpted with the snake. It's called Conan the Sacrifice. It's a statue that took me 9 months to sculpt. 9 months. I did it in clay. So I remember that it was my second licensed statue that I did for Conan. I had done one previous when we got to the agreement, and then I did the second one, which was the one I really wanted to do. And when I started that piece, I was very ambitious on what I wanted to do. I wanted to say, okay, I want to do the best Conan statue ever. I might not have succeeded in the opinion of, of a lot of people, it's okay. But in my opinion, I actually achieved that goal in terms of what I wanted to do and how it came out. And it's a huge statue with a huge snake. The snake has 8 feet long. Many people didn't believe me when I said that the first time, that the snake was 8 feet long. But because she's coiled on the base, you don't have that. You can't actually see that it's that long. But she's 8 feet long. I measured with the measuring tape, and so that's one of the statues that I'm most proud of, is the Conan statue that I did back in 2013.
Go ahead and send that to me, Arahom, and I'll go ahead and do a review for that for your viewers and everything. Not a problem.
That's not going to happen. No, I only have one that.
Yeah, you only have one. Yeah. You only have one. Well, I will tell you, man, it's the Conan. I'm a big Conan fan as myself. I have all of Conan's Conan the Barbarian books from Marvel, and I grew up reading Howard's book on Conan. There's a little bit of a dry reading, but definitely the comic books and the magazines, Savage Sword of Conan, things like that were a great love for some of my fantasies and some of the mythology that I grew up reading. Obviously, will you always stick to mythology and fantasy pieces?
Well, first in the beginning, it was like an alternative to what the market was about. The market was always about superhero statues, and there was DC Comics and there was Marvel Comics, and that was it. There was nothing else in the market, basically, right? It was a little bit here and there, of course, but basically the big bulk of the market of statues was dominated by DC or Marvel characters, and I didn't have license to do either one, right? So this is a basic, very interesting thing about how ARH Studios started, right? So ARH Studios are right there. I was a sculptor, and I love to do superhero statues. I have done many statues of superheroes in my life as a sculptor, right? I love to sculpt Batmans and Superman and stuff like that. I was a big fan, and I wanted to be part of that industry, right? In the beginning, 20 years ago, I wanted to be one guy one day working for Boeing. That was one of the dreams I had when I was younger, right? I wanted to, oh my gosh, imagine that one day Boeing picks up one of my statues. That would be a great accomplishment. That was my biggest goal at the time, 20 years ago. But then I realized very fast that I was never talented enough to be picked up by Boeing. There were many other sculptors that were better than me. My statues were basically mediocre, to be honest with you. My quality for sculptures was very, very limited in terms of what I could accomplish with clay. And I was very frustrated by that because I didn't have enough talent to be one of the great guys in the industry, right? And then I realized, unfortunately, I would never be hired by Boeing. Never would be hired. I tried. He's a very nice guy. I exchanged a few emails with him, and I even submitted some of my work for him. And he was always very, very polite, but he never actually got interested in producing one of my work. And I said, okay, I will never actually get a chance in succeeding as a sculptor, you know. So, and then then I'm gonna produce my own statues for myself. That was basically how ARH Studio started. It's a frustration inside me for knowing that I wasn't good enough for Boeing, but I could be good enough for ARH Studios, right? So, and then I did that. I started and say, okay, I'm going to produce my own statues with my own talent, with all my own limited ability, and see what the market says. Maybe the market will like enough for me to keep going. And that's how ARH Studios started, out of a frustration for not being a good sculptor, basically, right? And then, of course, what happens was that once I started as a company, I hired the same guys that were working for Boeing to work for ARH Studios. All the big names that were sculpting for Boeing, I hired them. I paid them more money than I was making myself. Okay, so for you, as a company, I was taking at the end of the month for me personally less payment than I was paying these guys. Right? They had a bigger salary than I had as being the owner of the company. And that took many years like that. I was making less money than I was paying other people that were working for me. And then only that was when ARH Studios started to get known, because I associated my name, which is a mediocre name, with these guys, big names in the industry. And so suddenly it was not Arahom statue was one of these big guys' names statue associated to mine. So I was using their name to promote ARH Studios, and it worked. And it worked. It worked.
Is ARH short? I guess is short for Arahom, or where did you get the name ARH from?
ARH is basically a short for my name.
Okay.
Because here's one interesting fact about that. In my family, it was me, my father, and my brother, right? We were the three men in my family. My father's name is Alfredo, right? Alfredo. So he used to sign ALF, three letters of the first three letters of his name. So we were used to see him signing and referring to himself as Alf, ALF. So he would use three letters, ALF. And I was a kid, and my father was my hero. And I said, okay, I want to have three letters for my name as well. And then I started writing ARH instead of Arahom to emulate my father, to be like him. I wanted to have three letters that would, but I was a kid, like 10, 12 years old when I started doing that. And my brother as well, he is used to do that. He would use ARS. That was the three letters of his name, ARS. So among us, the three of us, I was ARH, my father was ALF, and my brother was ARS. So that's how it started. And then when I created a company, I said, okay, that's going to be my company name, ARH. But it all came from my father.
Arahom, I apologize. I originally told you we're going to be on for about an hour. We're on an hour and a half now that we've been talking, and it's been interesting. I still have tons and tons of questions for you. It's just like what we covered tonight is not even the tip of the iceberg of what I would love to know about ARH Studios, about you as the CEO, as a creator, as a person, but like anybody's type of I guess attention span, you can only but go so long when you do a show, right? But I want to apologize for keeping you on a lot longer than I asked you to come on for. But
I didn't even notice it, to be honest. I just looked at the clock there.
Yeah, we never do. But I will ask you that. I hope for a few months from now, after a few releasements and everything like that, I'd love to invite you back on the show, and we can talk a little bit more about where ARH has been going, how the achievements you've made from that time, and just and maybe get a wider viewpoint of everything. So I would love to have you on again.
Sure, anytime, man. I actually revealed in your show a secret that I had kept so long. my dreams of one day having a movie made of one of my characters. This is actually, I never said told anybody, but I was excited, and I said, okay, whatever, let everybody know.
Here's the thing. This character, and I love this cover, by the way, gorgeous cover, inspiration to this this piece. I can tell. Just the storyline of that, and that's why I had mentioned that. You know, I just don't want to see this as a movie. I would love to see it as a continuing episode, because with like something like HBO or Netflix series or some type of series, even that, you get to develop the character more, you get to know more about the character, and it's, you know, and it's just so much better, I think, than just being in the big screen. Eventually being big screen, I know that's a dream of you, but I think a lot of us nerds and geeks now, we go towards more Netflix and HBO series than we do anything.
I love those as well. When I started writing Arcala, I actually had dreamed of becoming a TV series like Spartacus. You guys have seen, I'm sure you have seen Spartacus.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love Spartacus from the beginning.
Love that series bad. You know, I say, my gosh, if one day I could have something like that. You know, so you know, I love that series. I have a Game of Thrones as well. I'm a collector. I have all the series, the seasons as in DVD and stuff. So I am a big fan of TV series as well. But you know, the movie has that magic, I guess. I think, you know, when you think
it does, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But like fans like me that love a character and love a storyline, I just want to see it keep going on. You know, I just don't want, it's not enough for me to see an hour or 2 hours of that character. I want more, you know, I want more of that character, you know? So yeah, absolutely. Hey, Sean, man, before we let our special guest off for the night and just kind of let him go for the night, anything else, man?
I just want to say that one of the first questions we sat down tonight to ask was, what inspired you and your pieces? But what I've realized is the most inspiring is the journey and the future of ARH Studios. And I just want to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been amazing. I loved it.
Well, thank you so much. I think you guys were very nice to me. You know, you didn't ask me any embarrassing questions or anything that couldn't be put him in a spot. So I think you guys made it look a lot more than what it is.
No, not at all. You made ARH look what it is, Arahom, to be honest with you. All we do is ask questions. We want to get to know ARH Studios. We want to get to know you as a person. Comic Talk is not out to embarrass anybody or put anybody down. We're always about the passion and the love, the inspiration of the collecting, the hobby, everything. You can ask Sean from the beginning. That's what it's always about, is just getting people together and the love and have everybody come together as collectors, you know? So, and thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you guys, and I wish success to you and your show, you know, and your channel, and you can be sure that you got another subscriber there. I'm gonna subscribe to your channel definitely, and I appreciate the opportunity. And again, it was great to be able to talk about things that I love. I love what I do. You know, I don't do that for money. Honestly, I do that because I have this passion that burns inside me that wants to do these things. And regardless if I'm successful, you know, financially or not, as long as I have money to keep going, I think I'm going to keep going, you know. So, awesome. So it was a great opportunity to be here, and you two guys are nice, and thank you for the opportunity again. Okay.
Thank you for your opportunity. And guys, hey, everybody out there, whether you watched it live tonight or you're gonna watch it on, you know, after the fact that we aired and everything. Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions for Arahom in the future, we're going to get him back on here in, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 months, whenever he's not busy. And we're going to just kind of do an update on ARH Studios. You guys, you see what I have of ARH Studios, a big fan. Reason why I definitely wanted Arahom onto my Comic Talk, statue talk, and just talk a little bit about, you know, some of the, and as you noticed, his love and passion for what he does, and that's what it's all about, guys. And in the future, I hope to give you guys a little bit more of a review and talk about some of the art pieces and definitely art history that he's definitely making in the future. So, guys, thank you very, very much for watching. You guys be safe out there. Tune in once again in the future for another episode of Comic Talk. You guys take care of yourselves.